Hey sports card fans, it's John Wade Boggs fan. Hope you're all doing well. A lesser known set from the 1930s, 1933 Tattoo Orbit follows some of the more popular sets from the time with its use of brightly colored backgrounds. The cards, designated as R305, were originally issued in penny packs of tattoo chewing gum, which is a product of the Orbit Gum Company, a subsidiary of the Wrigley Gum Company. Unlike other gum cards, Tattoo Orbit cards did not come in wax packs. They were distributed in 1-cent decorative sleeves. Orbit Gum was based in Chicago, so it's not a shock that 25% of the 60-card set are members of the Chicago Cubs. 6 more cards are Chicago White Sox players. The Red Sox, Indians, Athletics, and Browns have 6 cards apiece, while the Cardinals have 5. The Reds and Phillies have 2 players each, while there is 1 each of the Brooklyn Dodgers and Boston Braves. 4 teams are not represented: the Yankees, Giants, Tigers, and Senators. That helps keep set prices somewhat in check. The cards measure 2" by 2¼ inches and showcase a black and white photograph of the player, although a fleshy tint is applied to the player's face and hands to give it a more colorful tone. The player's name is noted at the top, and a thick white border encloses the design. Background color scheme on the card front is bold, with red, green, and yellow dominating the card face. That's in contrast to the card back, which is gray and plain. The back lists the player's name and position, birth date, height, and weight. It also lists the team name in quotation marks, which is a charming touch. The cards are unnumbered. The card stock is thin, which makes it prone to wear, so finding high-grade cards is extremely difficult. While Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig are not included in the set, there are 17 Hall of Famers scattered throughout the set. The big names include Dizzy Dean, Rogers Hornsby, Jimmy Fox, Lefty Grove, Paul Wainer, Connie Mack, and Mickey Cochran. The Rogers Hornsby card is one of several reported short prints. However, not all collectors feel the short prints are any more difficult to find. In this video, I'm going to show the top 10 most valuable cards from the 1933 Tattoo Orbit set based on their PSA 3 values. I'll also give the values of those cards in higher grades, as well as the population count of those grades. Now, as a side note, because some cards have very low population counts, the values in some grades might not reflect current prices, since it may be a year or 2 or even more since a copy in that grade has been sold. In those cases, the price shown for the card is the most recent sale in VCP's database. Now, before I get to the top 10, here are the cards that just missed the top 10. At number 15, the Connie Mack card. At number 14, the Chick Hafey card. At number 13, the Frank Grube card. At number 12, the Mickey Cochran card. And at number 11, the Pinky Whitney card. So, which cards made the top 10 list? Let's go find out. Coming in at number 10, we have the Ted Lyons card. In a PSA 3, there have been 3 graded copies with a current VCP average price of $133. There have been 5 graded at PSA 4, the last one selling for $190. There have been 7 graded at PSA 5, the last one selling for $270. There have been 15 graded at PSA 6, the last one sold for $319. There have been 9 graded A PSA 7, the last one sold for $285. And there have been 2 graded A PSA 8. The last PSA 8 sale took place in April of 2018 through a PWCC listing on eBay. And just like every card on this top 10 list, there's not been a PSA 9 or 10 graded copy of the Ted Lyons card. At number 9, we have the Earl Aval card. In a PSA 3, there have been 3 graded copies with a current VCP average price of $160. There have been 4 graded at PSA 4. The last one sold for $225. There have been 5 graded at PSA 5. The last one sold for $120. There have been 12 graded a PSA 6. The last one sold for $236. And there have been 5 graded a PSA 7. The last PSA 7 sale took place in September of 2020 through Heritage and sold for $384. And there's not been a PSA 8 graded copy of the Earl Aval card. At number 8, we have the Gabby Harnet card. In a PSA 3, there have been 4 graded copies with a current VCP average price of $195. There have been 6 graded at PSA 4. The last one sold for $180. There have been 6 graded a PSA 5. The last one sold for $300. There have been 11 graded a PSA 6. The last one sold for $317. There have been 9 graded a PSA 7. The last one sold for $419. And there have been 2 graded a PSA 8. The last PSA 8 sale took place in July of 2019 through Heritage and sold for $552. At number 7, we have the Al Simmons card. In a PSA 3, there have been 3 graded copies with a current VCP average price of $200. There have been 2 graded a PSA 4. The last one sold for $185. There have been 9 graded a PSA 5. The last one sold for $260. There have been 8 graded a PSA 6. The last one sold for $540. There have been 6 graded a PSA 7. The last one sold for $456. And there's only been 1 graded a PSA 8. The only PSA 8 sale in VCP's database took place in July of 2019 through Heritage Auction and sold for $810, placing the Al Simmons at the number 5 spot in terms of PSA 8 graded copies on this top 10 list. At number 6, we have the Ernie Lombardi card. In a PSA 3, there have been 2 graded copies with a current VCP average price of $209. There have been 8 graded at PSA 4. The last one sold for $150. There have been 2 graded at PSA 5. The last one sold for $250. There have been 3 graded a PSA 6. The last one sold for $224. There have been 4 graded a PSA 7. The last one sold for $396. And there's only been 1 graded a PSA 8. The only PSA 8 sale in VCP's database took place in July of 2019 through that Heritage Auction and sold for $630. At number 5, we have the Paul Wainer card. In a PSA 3, there have been 4 graded copies with a current VCP average price of $241. There have been 3 graded a PSA 4. The last one sold for $203. There have been 10 graded a PSA 5. The last one sold for $168. There have been 6 graded a PSA 6. The last one sold for $211. There have been 12 graded a PSA 7. The last one sold for $540. And there have been 2 graded a PSA 8. The last PSA 8 sale took place in May of 2015 through a Heritage Auction and sold for $1,315, placing the Paul Wainer card at the number 4 spot in terms of PSA 8 graded copies on this list. At number 4, we have the Dizzy Dean card. In a PSA 3, there have been 5 graded copies with a current VCP average price of $499. There have been 7 graded a PSA 4. The last one sold for $1,475. There have been 7 graded A PSA 5. The last one sold for $900. There have been 11 graded A PSA 6. The last one sold for $1,692. There have been 6 graded A PSA 7. The last one sold for $1,860. And there have been 2 graded A PSA 8. The last PSA 8 sale took place in July of 2019 through that Heritage auction and sold for $3,360, placing the Dizzy Dean at the number 1 spot in terms of PSA 8 graded copies on this list. At number 3, we have the Lefty Grove card. In a PSA 3, there have been 6 graded copies, with a current VCP average price of $503. There have been 8 graded A PSA 4. The last one sold for $540. There have been 10 graded A PSA 5. The last one sold for $318. There have been 14 graded A PSA 6. The last one sold for $848. There have been 8 graded A PSA 7. The last one sold for $720. And there have been 2 graded A PSA 8. The last PSA 8 sale took place in January of 2018 through Memory Lane and sold for $1,596, placing the Lefty Grove at the number 3 spot as well in terms of PSA 8 graded copies on this list. Coming in at number 2, we have the Rogers Hornsby card. In a PSA 3, there have been 6 graded copies with a current VCP average price of $560. There have been 6 graded A PSA 4. The last one sold for $1,440. There have been 10 graded A PSA 5. The last one sold for $1,195. There have been 5 graded A PSA 6. The last one sold for $1,200. And there have been 7 graded A PSA 7. The last PSA 7 sale took place in January of 2022 through Heritage and sold for $2,220. And there has not been a PSA 8 graded copy of the Rogers Hornsby card. And at number 1, we have the Jimmy Fox card. In a PSA 3, there have been 5 graded copies with a current VCP average price of $910. There have been 11 graded A PSA 4. The last one sold for $780. There have been 1 graded A PSA 5. The last one sold for $291. There have been 12 graded A PSA 6. The last one sold for $960. There have been 5 graded A PSA 7. The last one sold for $1,200. And there have been 7 graded A PSA 8. The last PSA 8 sale took place in June of 2021 through PWCC and sold for $2,076, placing the Jimmy Fox at the number 2 spot in terms of PSA 8 graded copies on this list. Well, there you go, the top 10 most valuable cards from the 1933 Tattoo Orbit set. As always, would love to know what you think about the set and the cards that made the top 10 list. And stay tuned for next week's episode, in which I take a look at the top 10 most valuable cards from the 1932 US Caramel set. And if you've missed either of the last 2 videos in this series, you can check them out right here. With that, that's all I have for you. So until next time, thanks for watching.